Welcome everybody. Good afternoon to everyone joining our webinar today. Today, Lucy and I will go through how your business can benefit from participating in energy flexibility programs. Okay, so these programs that we're going to discuss today are seen globally and similarities are visible country by country. However, today we will focus on the UK and Ireland. In this webinar, specifically, we're going to focus on why now? What are the energy flexibility programs and how do they work? Who can participate? How to apply? What are the incentives in participating now? And how can we mitigate this risk for now and the future? At this point, we're also going to invite two companies joining us for a Q&A, okay, to discuss their current experiences with flexibility and how they've been using this over the last few years or recently. And then we'll have a live Q&A with the audience. Okay. Also to note, throughout this webinar, we have incorporated a couple polls. What this will do is it will simply pause the screen and allow you a minute or so to input your answers, okay, to give us and yourselves an understanding of what you've seen so far. What we'll then do is resume and continue to demonstrate the great benefits of energy flexibility. As you can see here, the energy landscape is changing in unprecedented ways. Change is only accelerating, and it's not the fittest that will survive. It's the most responsive and the companies that are best positioned to adapt to change that will succeed. And this is why we believe the future of energy management is currently very active. We believe that in the face of disruption in the energy landscape, as we've seen over the last few months/years, traditional silos of supply, demand, sustainability must converge. Okay, the entire enterprise must align actions and investments under a single holistic strategy to achieve long-term goals. The energy landscape in Europe and the UK is undergoing significant transformations driven by several key factors. In Europe, there is a strong focus on transitioning towards cleaner and more sustainable energy sources. The EU has set ambitious targets to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 and increase the share of renewable energy in the energy mix. In the UK, the government has set target to reach net zero emissions by 2050 as well. There is a significant shift towards renewable energy with a particular emphasis on offshore wind power, as well as other sustainable and renewable energy sources. Of course, that causes issues and risks to other companies, specifically looking at the grid and the infrastructure that it currently holds. Okay. Both Europe and the UK are experiencing a growing interest in decentralized energy systems, and so therefore are looking to make it a more efficient structure. This leads us on nicely to the energy trilemma. Okay, when most companies think of the energy strategy, the first thing companies think about is sustainability and climate. However, there is much more that is associated to this, especially when it comes to risk management and resilience. Over the last few years, most conversations have been around how can companies become more green? Okay, green being more renewable or sustainable or using the cleanest form of energy. However, since the Ukraine war and the following energy crisis, it has now changed to now looking for more a secure and affordable energy as these prices come together. Okay, so what does this mean for companies now? How are they preparing to ensure secure and affordable energy moving forward? This is what the energy trilemma looks at, and this is what we look to resolve.
Okay, so Stephanie just touched on there, when companies think about energy management, we think about resilience and risk reduction. Those are usually high on the list. But I think it's also useful to think about that in two categories. So you've got physical risk, so associated with climate change. And then there's the transition risk, or it could be regulatory risk, and that we think we're going to see an increase in policies that are going to favour more clean energies and more sustainable practices. But it is probably that first risk, the one about physical risk, that tends to come to mind first when we think about energy strategies. We think about the fact we're probably going to see more of these extreme weather events. And this is a really nice example of Lower Manhattan. So this is Lower Manhattan as it is most days. but we're going to focus on Lower Manhattan during Hurricane Sandy. And what you might remember from that event and from the news is that most of Lower Manhattan lost power. Goldman Sachs is the building that's lit up like a beacon in Lower Manhattan here. And it actually created a ton of negative press for them. As you can imagine, every hospital and first responders not got power, and then Goldman Sachs has their entire building lit up top to bottom. So there were lots of headlines at the time about the haves and the have-nots, and great if you were selling newspapers, but hideous if you're Goldman Sachs. There were several interviews afterwards with Lord Blankfein, who was the CEO of Goldman Sachs at the time, and he pointed out that they'd actually learned a lot from 9/11. So when they built their building in Lower Manhattan, they built it with resiliency and redundancy in mind. There was a lot of backup power. They invested in testing and preparation and resiliency planning. In fact, the day before Hurricane Sandy, they put out 25,000 sandbags, which is just a crazy number. You can go online, you can see pictures of it, and you see the businesses around there with a couple of sandbags at the door, and then Goldman Sachs like a fortress of sandbags. And Lord Blankfein says, we looked ridiculous. And that's what I really like about this story and that quote. When you look at this picture, which side do you want to be on? Do you want to be Goldman Sachs with that resiliency plan, or do you want to be left behind in the dark? And that's that quote. What looked ridiculous before the event, afterwards is now looking like really smart planning. So although we hope we don't see another Hurricane Sandy event in New York for the foreseeable future, or anywhere else in the world for that matter, the reality of climate change means that these things are going to happen more often. So as companies, we need to think about redundancy, resiliency planning, and we're increasingly seeing this topic not just in sustainability reports, but in a broader annual report setting and planning in general across the business. Which brings us to our first poll question. So does your company have an energy resiliency plan? So you're going to have 60 seconds now to submit a response to this poll, and we will share the findings. If we get them in time, we'll share them now. If not, we'll do it later. So you will be brought back to the PowerPoint, either if you wait out the time or if you fill your response. Once you've responded, you'll see the PowerPoint again. So just a little bit more time for people to finish collating those responses and get your response in.
Another reminder as well, during the webinar, please do ask us questions. Very keen to answer them towards the end of the webinar. Fantastic.
Okay, so we'll keep moving forward with the PowerPoint, but we'll share the results of that poll once we have them later on. So Stephanie spoke earlier about this energy trilemma. I am an eternal optimist, so I like to see this rather than a trilemma as the energy opportunity. So it really isn't an easy equation to balance, as Stephanie touched on, but through an integrated 360-degree approach to this trilemma or opportunity triangle, companies can adopt solutions that can mitigate those risks. They can create visibility and generate revenues for their company, ultimately increasing their competitive advantage. So with energy flexibility programs, such as demand response that we're talking about today, companies can tick all three sides of this triangle. So from a sustainability standpoint, programs like demand response allow more distributed energy resources to be integrated into the network. And this reduces the need for peaking power plants and the emissions associated with those. From an energy security standpoint, you're ensuring the stability of the electrical network itself, which is going to reduce the risk of power cuts, both for your business and for the communities that you sit within. And then from an affordability standpoint, demand response is going to give you the opportunity to generate new revenues for your business. Sounds great, but What is demand response? Well, demand response is known by a couple of different names. You could know it by demand side flexibility, DSR, frequency flexibility, energy flexibility, virtual power plants. Basically, it refers to balancing demand on the power grids by encouraging customers to shift their electrical demand to times when electricity is more plentiful or the demand is lower. And this is done through monetary incentives. So today we're going to concentrate on the UK and Ireland. But these schemes and the principles behind them apply to all countries. So as the largest global demand response aggregator with over 8.2 gigawatts of flexible assets, Enel are well positioned to support your business wherever you're based. The basic proposition says that there's an opportunity for you to effectively create a new revenue stream for your business, utilizing the assets and infrastructure that you already have in place. So it means there's no capex involved in this. And the revenue stream that you can generate can be quite significant. It could account for 3 to 5 to 10% reduction in your energy cost, which obviously is relatively compelling. So you think about it and think, yeah, that sounds great. And then the questions start coming, don't they? You want more details. Yeah, how are we going to do that? Is this going to impact my operation? Can we really implement this within our business? What are the controls with engineering to make this happen? And that's why we wanted to invite some of our existing customers to talk to you a little later on in this webinar, so they can give you their open and honest feedback and experience on enabling grid flexibility within their organizations.
Fantastic. I think that leads on nicely to how does demand response work?
Exactly. How does it work? It's a million-dollar question there, Stephanie. So energy flexibility looks different for every business. So one of the first steps when we're working with a new customer is to really understand and devise a plan for them that will allow them to reduce their energy use without impacting their operations in any way. So once enrolled, so once we've gone through that process, we have the plan and you're enrolled in one of these programs. If an event occurs, you're going to get a notification, and depending on the program you're in, it could be 1 to 3 hours in advance of an event. And then you'll need to respond at a certain time, so you'll know when that time is. You'll follow that energy reduction plan that was devised for you, and then you'll receive a payment from Enel for that. So Enel have worked with third-party consulting firm Afry to actually develop the world's first carbon dioxide reduction certification program for demand response customers. So we've used an innovative methodology. It's been completely approved. It conforms to ISO standards and is approved by RENA. And we calculate the carbon dioxide that's been avoided in that energy management supply chain that's activated through demand response. So through the fact that you don't need those peaking power plants or the fossil fuels that would be burnt by them, there would be a carbon dioxide saving. We provide customers with an annual CO2 saving certificate. Now this is assigned to both Scope 2, Scope 3 and unattributed carbon savings. This demonstrates both your support of the scheme, but also the emissions that you've avoided thanks to that participation. For smaller companies, because your carbon savings may be a little bit smaller, they're integrated with other participants in your country. So whilst your individual demand response, say carbon savings might be small, when combined across a community of participants, you become part of quite a significant decarbonisation story.
I think that's really interesting, Lucy, what you've just mentioned there, highlighting, what is demand response? How does it work? I think the next question really and truly is who can participate? Is there a particular sector? Is there a particular industry? Do I have to have a specific type of equipment? Is there a qualification process? I mean, to all of those questions, yes, there is an answer, as you can see here. There's a range of industries and sectors on the screen now. And in all honesty, yes, everyone can participate. There is a very simple qualification process, something that we can support you with, something that we can look at. An example here is that there's a few to highlight. So one I actually chose was the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, let's say a company that is in responsible for drug discovery, drug development, drug production. Let's say when that is the case, let's use a biotech R&D company identifying compounds for drug creation. Okay, they can have many different types of curtailment methods. Okay, one being transferring a load to a backup generator. Okay, most pharmaceutical plants have backup generators, so it is something that they can then look at as an alternative or something they can do to participate. Very simply, dim the lights. We don't really think about that, but we can dim the lights here and there. And then we've also got turning down chillers or adjusting the heating or the aircon throughout the day, maybe looking at it on a seasonal basis. These actions can provide curtailment and additional revenue to you and also support you on your resiliency plans. Okay.
So I think there's always a lot of hidden areas for energy flexibility that might not come to mind. We think of batteries, we think of generators, CHPs, but that's why sometimes just coming to a company like Enel, we can work with you and we can help you kind of discover some of that hidden flexibility that might not be first to mind, but is hidden within the organization, and we can unlock that for you.
Definitely. And that leads us nicely to value stream.
Exactly. So the markets are different. We said before, we're going to be concentrating today on the UK and Irish markets, but we work across 80 programs globally. Within the UK and Ireland, as you see here, there's a broad range of different markets, different schemes that we participate in. You know, at one end of the spectrum, we participate in the frequency control market, which is designed to support the grid from sudden outages. So that could be a transmission line that trips or a large power plant that goes down. And for this, we need to deliver a response in a few seconds to milliseconds. In this case, we have end-to-end automation with remotely controlled metering at the customer site that can kind of seamlessly move from that grid power to backup power, such as a battery. At the other extreme, you've got emergency resources that the network operator might need to procure to protect themselves during extreme days of very high demand. So you can think of the heat wave that we had in the UK. It's probably a long distant memory for many of us now. At the end of June, UK and Ireland, we had a heat wave now. For those of you in Europe with the ongoing heat waves, the heat wave that you're experiencing right now, where that demand is really approaching that supply limit. So these events usually have longer notice periods. So you could have 1 to 3 hours notice in advance that allows those customers to shut down production lines or move to backup power. What's a really nice thing is that your business can participate and join completely independently of your retail purchasing agreement. So, you know, if you're happy with who you're buying power from today, the structure of the tariff, you know, you like the retailer, they're a nice person, that's great. You don't need to change any of that. Your demand, you can do demand response kind of in addition to that and separate from that retail agreement.
So again, it sounds quite flexible.
It is, yeah. And to ensure you're getting that flexibility and the most out of it, we think the best way to enable that flexibility is through an aggregator. And an aggregator is basically a company such as Enel. You know, we see ourselves as a conductor, basically, of an orchestra. We manage this portfolio of clients as a group, and they can all benefit together from the energy flexibility markets. And as well as benefit of reducing or eliminating some of the risks around non-performance or underperformance, this aggregation allows smaller companies to benefit and enter the flexibility markets where either their load alone might be too small for them to enter individually, or it might just be too much hassle for them to do that. There's also multiple value streams that we've touched on here with some of the different markets that you can play in, just like some of the different instruments that you might see within an orchestra. Working with an aggregator, we understand those value streams. We know the different rules and the different criteria for participation. So we can make sure that you have a successful route to market, optimizing your experience so that you get the right value streams for your business. We can tell you how to participate, when to participate, and probably the key one is when not to participate in these programs. So our role is really to remove that complexity around the decision-making process, ensuring that you're in the right market at the right time and that your revenues are maximized with the minimum disruption to your business.
I think that's great. And I think also, just to remind the audience, anything that Lucy and I have mentioned today, we do have a live Q&A at the end. So please do ask us in the GoToWebinar chat that should be there on your screen. Okay. And nicely, what I'd like to cover now is who are we? You know, Lucy and I, where do we come from? What company do we work for? And why are we covering this? So essentially, we are from the Enel Group, as you can see here. Initially, the Enel Group was established in 1962 by the Italian state. So it's an Italian state electricity and gas provider, okay, global energy company with a rich history spanning over 60 years and operating in more than 30 countries, generating, distributing and selling energy to millions of customers worldwide. As you can see here now, we have also then arms that we fall into were NLX, but you've got Enel Green Power that you might have heard of, NLX Way, but specifically on NLX to mention here, we're the innovative division of the Enel Group, focusing specifically on driving sustainable energy solutions, leveraging cutting-edge technologies to develop and implement more sustainable future by providing these integrated and integrated solutions for businesses, for individuals, companies, etc., enabling them to optimize their energy consumption and contribute to a cleaner, smarter, and more efficient world. And something that we've mentioned already today, you know, the energy transition, becoming more sustainable, it is a journey, okay, but coming from Enel itself has been on this energy transition many times, and will probably continue to do so as the future shows us. However, due to that, we are best equipped to support you to understand how to navigate through this. And as you can see, it's not a linear, the sustainable journey is not linear. It's got many left and right turns, and in order to be successful and resilient, you are going to need support. You are going to need to understand the best ways that your company can monetize maybe on sustainability, monetize on those assets that you might not necessarily be using or using in the right way. And that leads us nicely over to our Q&A. And I think we're being joined by Matthew and Edward. What we'd like to do is introduce them. So we've got Matthew McKenna from Irish Cement. And we've also got Edward Knox from Anglian Water. Hello, both.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Ed. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
It's good to be here.
Maybe if you want to start, Ed, do you want to give everybody a quick introduction to who you are and what it is that you do with Anglian Water?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everybody. So I'm Ed Knox. I'm Anglian Water's energy supply and demand specialist. So Anglian Water, we are a major water supply and wastewater treatment company based in East Anglia in Lincolnshire. And my role, I sit within specifically within the carbon neutrality team within Anglian Water.
Same question for you, Matthew. Can you give us a brief intro to you and what it is that you do with Irish Cement?
Hi all, my name's Matthew McKenna. I'm the production manager in Irish Cement in one of our sites in Ireland. I obviously manage all the production side of the business. We produce 1.3 million tons of clinker per year and over 1.4 million tons of cement. We also have a second site down in Limerick, which is slightly smaller than that, and I actively manage the coordination with NLX on the Platten site that I work in this last number of years.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. It's great that you were able to join us today. Thank you for agreeing to share your experiences with everybody on the call. So perhaps Matthew, first question for you. Can you talk to me a little bit more about Irish Cement's participation in the energy flexibility program? So, what programs you participate in and what equipment you use for that participation?
Okay, so yeah, we're quite a large site. We'd be one of the largest energy consumers on the island of Ireland, and we've participated in both the demand response and the DS3 scheme for this last number of years. There's been various different iterations of it down through the years, but basically, yeah, we have quite a large site where some of the equipment needs to run 24/7, and obviously we don't participate with that in the scheme. We've got about maybe 10 to 15 megawatts that at any one time needs to be kept running, depending on the time of year. And then we have a rated we have a rated demand shedding of about 23 megawatts on the site, and at any given time we would have maybe 10 to 15 megawatts of that available. We are quite proactive with Enel if we have any major disruptions to production or any high demand times of the year. We can also book out some of the capacity that we do, but we also have a frequency or the DS3 scheme where if there is certain issues on the national power grid and the frequency drops below a certain level, that there are certain pieces of equipment that are automated to trip on our site. Again, these are non-critical pieces of equipment such as mills, and we've done numerous tests with Enel to automate it. Again, it works quite well. Luckily enough, we've been booked into the scheme. We haven't had a single trip in over 18 months now on the site. So again, that's working really, really well for us.
That's a really, really great summary. It's nice to hear that, that mix of programs that you're in, so both the frequency and the demand response program, and the different ways that you participate, some of it being automation with a remotely controlled frequency programs, but then also you're managing some of that on site, and I assume controlling some of that locally as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I've got the same questions for you, Ed. I know you're in a different industry, even a different country to Matthew and I over with you and Stephanie being over in the UK. So can you talk to me a little bit about how Anglian Water participate in energy flexibility and the sort of equipment that you're using?
Yes, of course. So we are a capacity market customer, so we take part in the UK capacity market. One of the major assets that we use are our raw water pumping stations. So these are two of the biggest ones are the pumping stations that we've got on the rivers Welland and Nene, and they pump into our major storage reservoirs at Rutland and Graffham. So they have large storage volumes and capacities available, and so we're able to use that kind of flexibility in those systems to be able to delay pumping if we get capacity market events, and we have to obviously make sure we maintain or stay within our target levels, but because those reservoirs are so vast, we are normally able to do that. Obviously, if we're in kind of drought periods, then we have to consider our response, but usually that's not a problem. And we've also got other assets. We've got some standby generation that takes part as well. That generation is MCPD compliant, and then some other smaller pumping stations as well.
So yeah, Rutland reservoirs, I've got my fly fishing rods in the background here, so I'm very familiar with a couple of those reservoirs that you mentioned there from a fishing standpoint. But from a practical point of view, does that mean, is most of this remotely controlled, or is that someone on your site? Now, how are you participating in these events if you're asked to participate?
So most of these responses at those sites are manual. So how we are notified by yourselves of an event, capacity market notice is about 3 hours in advance. Mm-hmm. So we with that warning, we get text messages and emails that come to certain members of the carbon neutrality team. But also the key people really are the operational people that it goes to. So the operation teams at Graffham and at Wing, which is treatment works for Rutland, but then the other key people are our operational management centre, who are based in Lincoln, and they're 24/7 control room, who are able to kind of coordinate response to events when they are called. So it's mainly a kind of manual response, but the Lincoln control room can obviously then do those controls remotely.
Yeah, so there'd be oversight as well. Okay. Yeah, interesting to hear the different ways it's managed across the two businesses. Now, from your side, Matthew, how I know you've been participating for a number of years in these schemes, but if we think back to when you first started out and you went to your ops team or the boards, what was the major concern about participating in demand response?
Yeah, and I suppose the landscape has gone full circle. I suppose when we started participating, or my memory of it starting participating, I wasn't always involved in it on the site, but around 2014, 2015, we weren't in a sold out market. Things were quite quiet, so it suited quite well to be able to knock off the equipment on the demand response side. So that was no issue whatsoever, and we always tried to book in as much as possible and to try and maximize the revenue for the business. Later in 2019 into early 2020, pre-COVID, and then post-COVID again, when things were booming, we were in a very much a sold-out market, and the landscape changed. So we would not have participated as much as we would have historically participated in the demand response scheme. And again, once we worked with Enel to make it clear what was available and what wasn't, they were always very proactive in talking to us, in guiding us and giving us the right advice as to maximizing the revenue with what it is that we're prepared to do. And now that things have got a little bit quiet again, we've gone again full circle, and we've sort of shifted our strategy on that. So again, it works quite well. Also, within that time period, there might have been times when certain pieces of equipment, there was a failure and we were under a short-term struggle to get production out. Again, as long as we kept talking and kept everybody informed, Enel would or NLX would manage that with the operation. So it was quite seamless for us. I suppose the key was communication. From frequency response, or the DS3 scheme, again, that has very little impact. It's a very short-term action. Typically, there would have only been a couple of them across the year, and we were able to restart production fairly quickly after that. So yeah, that's how we managed it. And I suppose from my side, the key learning is, it's all about communicating where the business is and the pressures that the business is under, and our account manager managed everything then after that. So it works quite well. It's just being proactive on it.
It's really interesting here, because I think a lot of concerns we hear from clients is about how is this going to impact my operation. As you said, it's that communication, working together with the aggregator that you're with, be it NLX or other companies, to devise a plan that allows your operations to continue and adjusts as you need to. But also, that's the advantage of kind of being with the aggregators we touched on earlier. As your business changes, or if you have equipment down, you don't need to worry about some of the penalties for non-performance or underperformance, because you're part of a larger group. So we can carry that loss in one area initially, whilst others can pick that up.
Yeah,
definitely. And I think that's quite nice to hear from your perspective, Matt, how you guys manage that. But Ed, a quick question to you, kind of leading on. Does adjusting or turning off your pumps in any way affect the life expectancy or the operations, to adding any additional costs to you at Anglian Water?
No, not really. I mean, I guess the key point to make really is that what we're doing is part of a normal operation. So we're performing an action that these pumping systems are designed to do, so that they will routinely shut down for maintenance due to a lack of water due to changing in water quality. So we will routinely shut these systems down anyway. And I guess the other point to make maybe is the fact that the number of certainly for the capacity market, the number of events that we get in the course of a year are very small. So, or certainly, they have been over the last few years. There have been very few events, so we aren't making a massive number of turn off or turn down events. So yeah, very little impact.
Fantastic. That makes sense. On that, that's good to hear as well. And Matthew, one concern we do hear regularly, this question's for you, it's quite interesting to hear, is that participation in energy flexibility programs can affect operations or efficiency in any way. What happens to your equipment when you switch off? What do you guys do? Is there a plan? Is there something constructive?
I suppose we've got quite large pieces of equipment, and to isolate on them is quite tricky and a cumbersome process. So generally we just turn off for the short period of time. Often when we are asked to participate in the demand response, it is in the winter time, and it's not that we're not under massive demand. Obviously, it's when the national grid is under the most stress, which tends to be in that November, December time here in Ireland. And again, our sales tend to dip at that time of the year as well. So it's not a big issue. So there is times that we would, we're geared for stopping our equipment, the particular equipment that we're on, and maybe going, we do take the opportunity at times to do some small, small maintenance, on stuff like thermocouples, etc. But it's not a big issue to our business in particular, and it certainly doesn't impact on the efficiencies of the equipment. We tend to, even during the winter time, we tend to turn off a lot of the equipment in during peak time from 5 to 7, as the electrical price is at its dearest during that time. So that's not an issue for us at all.
Nice. So it works quite well with your plan already that you have for the year. Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. And Ed, a question to you. If you obviously there's many companies and people joining this webinar today wanting to understand what it means to be with an aggregator. So the question to you really is, would you say to companies that they don't need to be with an aggregator to participate in energy flexibility programs, or is it best to have one, in your opinion?
It's an interesting question. So I guess the point is not all companies do need to be in with an aggregator. However, there are benefits from doing so. I mean, first of all, it depends on the size of the loads that they've got available. If they might be too small to be able to go offer them directly to grid or whoever is providing the flexibility services. But certainly in our experience, there are plenty of benefits of being with an aggregator. So I think the point that Lucy mentioned a few minutes ago about kind of the periods when you maybe can't respond, for example, if we have got real stresses on water resource availability and we need to keep pumping, then being able to absorb those penalties and us not face any penalties is one of the key things that you wouldn't get by going direct. But then there's kind of there's plenty of other things that we don't have to manage by being with an aggregator. So notifications, for example, we don't have to manage the notifications for the events directly. They all come through yourselves, through NLX, and I guess the contracts and tendering as well that you do on our behalf is something that, you know, if we offer it directly, then we would have to take part in all of those auctions and manage those contracts with grid, and I guess the final point is around testing as well. So you have to prove to National Grid that you're able to meet those contracts. And if we were offering directly, then we would have to manage all of that testing ourselves, whereas it's something that the aggregator kind of takes the lead and is able to coordinate. So yeah, there's quite a few benefits of being with an aggregator. So it's something that people have to, you know, think about carefully.
Definitely, and I think you just touched upon there about notifications, and you mentioned the word penalties, and I think everyone's wondering, what does that mean? So just a quick question to you: what happens when you do receive a notification to activate your demand reduction plan, and then let's say for operational reasons, like you mentioned a little bit earlier, you can't comply? What are those penalties, and how are they covered?
So the penalties for us would be nothing, except for, I guess if we weren't able to respond and we hadn't made you aware, then I think it could result in reductions in availability payments, which would make sense because we're not available. But what we normally would do if we know that we're not going to be available for reasons such as I mentioned before, you know, knowing that we're going to have to be pumping because of water availability, then we would have those conversations in advance so that you would be aware that we aren't available for those reasons. So it's all about kind of having those communications up front and being more transparent.
That's great. That's great. And you have an account manager, of course, to support you and have that communication line open with.
Conversations go through the account manager. So yeah.
Fantastic. And just a closing question to both of you. You know, we've touched upon it a few times. You both have had great experiences. But what is the best advice you can give to other companies who are listening in now, and maybe developing a power and energy strategy plan, and potentially considering to join the flexibility programs for the first time? What would be your best advice, let's say?
I'll go first. I suppose from our point of view, it's been relatively seamless on our part. Okay, yeah, there was a bit of work involved around the DS3, the frequency response scheme, around automating that, and maybe there was certain ways that our automation system was set up for stopping certain parts of equipment that we had to really look at. But once we got that sorted, everything was really seamless. But from our point of view, you know, the account manager manages 90%. If we're starting to, if we're at risk of maybe a penalty or losing a payment, they will flag it to us and give us the best options. Again, that generally stimulates the conversation as to what's the best options for the business. But from us, it's a no-brainer. The revenue stream that this has generated for our business, you know, is very, very, very significant over the last 6 or 7 years, and you know, we've never looked back since joining up, and it's really staggering, you know, what's available for very little effort. And even, you know, a lot of the things that we're doing now, you know, are not any obstruction to our business. Again, if things start to turn and we get into a sold-out market again, we'll have to look at it, and maybe a slightly less revenue would be available, but it's still very, very manageable. And I would really encourage anyone to look at this if they are a large enough energy user.
Yeah, and thanks, Matt. I'll follow on from that. I mean, I guess the best and most straightforward advice I could offer would be to, for organisations to start with identifying their largest, most flexible demands. And the third point maybe is the demands that are most likely to be available. So if you've got a large demand that hardly ever runs, then maybe that's not the most suitable demand. But if you've got a large demand that runs 24/7 but can be flexible, then that's your prime candidate to start looking at opportunities and where you can include that.
So I think that's really useful, and I think just having this conversation now, I think we've probably addressed a lot of those thoughts and questions that people had in their mind about it all sounds too good to be true. How am I going to do this? How can I enable this? And what flexibility do I have with my business? So I know we've got a couple of questions that have come through on the chat, so we're going to get to those in a little bit. We did have a quick question, I believe a poll for everybody, just the last one. So just like before, it's going to come up on your screen. We just wanted to follow up to see if anyone on the call would like a consultation with NLX. So there's no obligation with this, but just if you want to understand some of the energy flexibility within your business, we can come out and we can speak to you and look at what sources of flexibility. As Stephanie spoke to earlier, not all of these are obvious. It's not just generators and CHPs. It can be pumps, it can be manufacturing lines to HVAC systems, lighting, refrigeration, to name but a few.
That's great. And then I think right after this poll, we'll go through some of the live questions that we've received during the webinar. So I think it's just a few more seconds to give you a chance to answer them.
Just to touch on the poll that we did earlier about energy resilience planning and do companies have energy resilience plans in place? The responses to that were at 19% of you said that yes, your company or your organization does have energy resiliency planning. The rest of the participants either has said no, there's no resiliency plan in place. That was just over 30%. And then nearly half, so 48%, weren't sure where their company was. So I think it is something to look into. If you're a manager within that organization, you're in charge of the facilities or the energy management for your business. Again, companies like NLX can help you understand that resiliency plan, develop a plan both to move forward with integrating sustainability, net zero in your business, but also ensuring that you have resiliency and sustainability at the forefront of them. So with that, perhaps we should move to some of the questions that we've got in, Stephanie.
Definitely. So I can see one here now. So the first one being, which are the best market mechanisms? And I think, Lucy, if you're happy to answer this one, this might be great. But which are the best market mechanisms through which to benefit from increasingly frequent periods of negative energy pricing?
The best market mechanisms for negative energy pricing. I guess it would be something like an energy storage device, so you can actually maximize if the pricing is going to be negative. You can store that energy and use it for arbitrage for later in the day. So things like the behind the meter energy storage.
Fantastic. I think we have another one here. We've got quite a few actually today. Thank you everybody for putting in your questions. So there's one more. When creating your energy reduction plan, so a client has asked, I think he's going through it. Were there any other sorry, I'm just trying to reread his question here. When you're creating an energy reduction plan, are you meant to understand the efficiency opportunities of each asset being included? So is the efficiency of each asset looked into?
I guess the question is probably more along the lines of did you identify any other efficiencies within the business through this process? We do that full 360 assessment of what can participate, how can they participate. Did this lead to any other improvements, either in the way that you're doing business, maybe staffing, so you can staff around some of these events within either the organisations might add, and you may not be aware of it.
Not really. I suppose it's a simple, on off, and how much load you're shedding on the main incomer for that. But what it, not particularly. It did give us some. We did find when we were doing some work for the frequency trip, we did find some issues around old breaker circuits that needed to be addressed. Actually, we found quite a lot, which was quite good. But from an efficiencies point of view, no, it did give us a good understanding of exactly how much power was being consumed by each of the large pieces of equipment. But we would have a good understanding, because we're such an energy intensive business already. We would have had a very good understanding on the efficiencies of our kit. So not particularly.
I mean, I do think that's quite a good point, though, because some companies will think they've got energy resiliency. They've got this generator in the background. It's great if power cut happens, I've got that. But they might not necessarily test it. So when they come to run that generator, it might not work as they expect it to. So sometimes, as you said, it's not necessarily savings we identify. It could be a problem with your resiliency plan or your backup power that you've never really tested and haven't realized until you've decided to move forward with something like this.
Yeah, we find that for ourselves, certainly it is an opportunity to test backup generation, and yeah, it's certainly a good time to do that. So yeah, it's something that we do.
Okay, I can see there's another question coming through. There's quite a few. So Donna asks, is there a minimum demand level or level of load shedding to be able to enter DSR contracts?
So it really will depend in the region where you're based. So as we talked about earlier, we're in the 80 different programs. Every program has different rules, different markets. So that's another advantage of being with an aggregator, is sometimes when we can amalgamate your load. So it could be if you're in a particular area, we can share that load with another company that's close by, or it could be just as an organization, we will group it together and you can become part of a bigger group or a bigger unit for that demand side. So with that one, it would kind of be a follow-up question of where are you based? Within Ireland, we can take smaller loads. Within the UK market, we tend to look for around a megawatt of load, but that can be amalgamated. So it doesn't mean if you don't have a megawatt of load, you can't participate. Definitely come and talk to us, and depending where you are, we may have another account that we can put you with so that you can participate.
Fantastic. I think do we have time for one more?
I'm sure we could squeeze one more in.
I think we can squeeze one more in. So Ryan has asked, what are the advantages to engaging with an aggregator in an energy flexibility plan opposed to hedging using a CPPA or a VPPA?
Do you want me to take that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I suppose they're two very different schemes. So your CPPA or your PPA would be very much on your partial of energy that you're going to consume and all energy. I suppose this is a very short-term reduction, so there's obviously no implications on any CPPA or PPA unless there's some built-in clause within that, but I haven't come across one yet. We've looked at quite a few and I didn't see anything regarding demand response. Again, demand response is a very, very short period of time. A typical shedding a load for us would be about 20 minutes, I would say, would be the average. And last year we got, I think it's around 14 throughout the year, and we had a particularly difficult winter on the grid in Ireland. So far this year, I believe there's only been 3, and from a frequency response, it's been well over 12 months since we had to do anything on that. Again, that wouldn't have any implications on a PPA or a CPPA. They're completely separate, and we had to actually increase the level at which the frequency trip happens, just to keep our payment live, because we had so little of them here in Ireland last year. So now we'll get our frequency trip and then drop back down to the lower level again. So to answer the question from our point of view, as far as I'm aware, there's absolutely no crossover between CPPAs or PPAs and the demand response. Again, unless you're generating power on site, you may be losing that, but outside of that, no, I can't see anything.
And I think you touched on that, some of the intricacies in the programs there with the frequency, the different set points, which again, comes back to that, why go with the aggregator? We understand those programs, we can help work them so you're maximizing that revenue and you're keeping to earn it as those markets evolve and things change within them. So, okay, well, I think we're coming up with 12:59 now. So thank you to everybody who stayed with us all the way through this to the end. Thank you again, Edward, Matthew, for participating, agreeing to join us today. Stephanie for joining me in the presentation, and for you all for attending. We really appreciate your time. If you have any questions, if you would like to follow up, our contact information is on the slide in front of you now. So please feel free to reach out to either Stephanie, myself, or generally on the NLX website, where you can find more information on our offerings and on the business itself.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.